Time for convening having arrived. The Senate will come to order. Would ask unauthorized visitors to exit the chamber at this time, and the Senate will come to order. Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 53rd.
Good morning, Mr. President. It's a beautiful day at our state capitol. A moment in history, Georgia history. On this date in 1915, the first public transcontinental telephone call was made from Jekyll Island, Georgia. And the journal has been read and found to be correct.
I tell you what, he's not only a great senator, he is a wonderful student of history as well. So thank you, Senator, for your good works on the journal and the history lesson, a moment in time of Georgia history. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to confirmation of the journal? Chair is none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators having bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 285 by Senators James of the 10th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 6 of Title 17.
Judiciary non-civil.
Senate Bill 286 by Senator Williams of the 19th, a bill to be entitled
Insurance
an act
and labor.
Senate Bill 287 by Senators James of the 35th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to
Education and youth.
Senate Bill 288 by Senators Ford of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to
Slow-go
amend.
general.
Senate Bill 289 by Senator Ford of the 39th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 21
Ethics
of those
Committee.
Senate Resolution 805 by Senator James of the 35th and others, a resolution recognizing Reverend Creflo.
Transportation.
Senate Resolution 809 by Senators Ford of the 39th and others, a resolution.
Slow-go general.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
The 9th legislative day. Let me take a moment back in the back corner to welcome the First Lady of the 20th District that's present with us today. I'll give her a round of applause. We're honored to have you with us today. And also, I think many of you certainly have received the email about the senator from the 30th. His mother, please keep their family in your prayers as well today. It's now time for the morning roll call. Time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes Senator from the 33rd. 33rd.
Good morning, sir. I'd like to excuse the senator from the 35th district, sir.
35th District, without objection, the senator from the 35th will be excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 36th.
36th.
Outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 36th will be excused with business outside the Capitol. Any other motions to excuse? Senators, please signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Can't get here on time, get here when you can. It's now time for our morning devotion. Time for our morning devotion. Would ask that all senators please take your seats and cease all audible conversation at this time as we prepare our chamber for our morning devotion on this great National Guard Day. It is now my distinct honor to recognize the distinguished senator from the 30th for the purpose of leading us in our pledge and introducing our chaplain of the day. Senator.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and the principles which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. Thank y'all. I have the privilege of introducing Chaplain Captain John A. Pirtle. He's a regional care chaplain for the Georgia Army National Guard. He is married to CJ, his wife of nearly 20 years. He and CJ have 2 children. Taylor, their 18-year-old daughter, is a freshman at Valdosta State University. Jeremiah, their 8-year-old son, is the best student in his homeschool class of 1. CJ is the one who teaches Jeremiah, but she also serves as a personal fitness trainer. John, a soldier of 12 years, he joined the Army as a scout in 1996. He deployed to Bosnia in 1997 and 98 during the Balkan War. He ETS'd in 2000 after receiving the call to Christian ministry. He attended seminary at Liberty Seminary and Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. He accessioned into the Georgia Army National Guard after seminary and deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 and 2013 as the battalion chaplain. John earned both his BA and MA in English from Western Carolina University and his Master of Divinity from Liberty Seminary. He hopes to earn his PhD before he turns 50. Too late for me on that one. Chaplain Pirtle currently serves as a full-time regional care chaplain based out of Marietta, where he ministers to the soldiers and the families of our great state. Please join me in welcoming Chaplain Captain John Pirtle.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning, and greetings from the great town of Fitzgerald. If you have a problem understanding the drawl, it's because that's home. But thank you so much for the opportunity. I am a regional care chaplain in the Guard, and I really don't have a job so much as a privilege. I love what I do, and I thank you for I had down here 50 to 60 minutes that I get to speak. I'm sorry, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I wanted to speak to you from one simple verse and from Scripture. It's from Paul's first letter to Timothy, and it's 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16. Paul writes to Timothy, he says, "Keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. Persevere in these things, and you will save both yourself and your hearers." Keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. And then Paul says, persevere or persist, and you will save both yourself and your hearers. Before I left Clay this morning, what y'all might know as Dobbins, we Army folks are Clay National Guard on the backside. I surveyed the headlines on my computer, and then I listened to talk radio driving into the city this morning, and 4 headlines jumped out at me. One was that here in our state, religious freedom, our First Amendment, is on the table. The Confederate flag debate rages in our state, kind of generates more heat than light. New ISIS videos have been released, and we learned that evil is real. It's not just a theological construct. And then the 4th headline that I heard on the way here as I pulled into the parking lot was that some of the candidates engaged in running for office are lambasting the competition. That was the phrase they used on the radio. So what's the takeaway? Religious freedom up for grabs, acrimony between candidates. ISIS videos, Confederate flag debate rages in our state. It seems like the takeaway was acrimony, bitterness. People are at each other's throats. And you, as our elected officials, may be tempted sometimes to sort of shake your head in despair at the state of affairs. But something that I noticed that we probably all, regardless of our politics, probably tend to do is we're probably better at seeing the faults in other people than we are in ourselves. It's very easy for me and maybe for you to point the finger and say, if only that person would change, or that person would come around, or that person would vote like I think he or she should. But when the Apostle Paul was instructing his Christian child in the faith, Timothy, he stressed the importance of self-assessment, of self-discipline, and of criticizing oneself and taking inventory of oneself before looking at others. Again, Paul says, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. Persist in this, for in so doing you will save both yourself and your hearers. Why did Paul stress that? I think it's because we all excel in pointing out the specks in other people's eyes rather than the logs in our own. That's why Jesus had such excoriating words for us in Matthew 7 about that. We tend to focus on the external problems, whether it's the things that are going on with people out to destroy our state or our nation. But Paul reminded Timothy, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. I don't know the circumstances of how you were called into the vocation that you have, men or women, the unique gifts that you have, the callings that you have to serve in government. But I would think that the responsibilities that you have are quite heavy, because you may feel the angst, the anxiety, the uncertainty of trying to serve multiple masters. How do you please your constituents without compromising your integrity? Speaking just from a biblical worldview, the worldview that I'm coming from, Paul reminded Christians, Timothy in particular, of how the Christian is to conduct himself or herself, and it begins with taking inventory before God. Again, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching. Persist in this, for by so doing, you will save both yourself and your hearers. I thank God for each of you, and I pray that you'll be faithful to carry out the duties that you're sworn to uphold. Would you join me in prayer? Our Father, because of Christ, we can come and petition the very throne room of heaven. Lord, I pray for all the men and women represented here, present, and those who may be away on other business. Thank you for the opportunity to speak truth into our halls of government. Father, may you find these men and women faithful to carry out the duties that they're sworn to uphold and defend. Thank you for the opportunity to be a minister in uniform. Thank you so much for our armed forces. And Lord, I just thank you for this time, and I pray that your word would find fertile soil about what it means to keep a close watch on ourselves and on the teaching. Before we look outside and criticize others, help us to be sober in our judgments and the way that we live our own lives, for then our ministries can be effectual. Father, thank you for hearing these prayers. Amen. Thank you so much.
Well done. Thank you so much. Great. Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? We do have members. Chair recognizes the distinguished lady from the 45th District. Rise on a point of personal privilege. Please give the senator your attention. Senator from the 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Good, happy Monday morning. I just wanted to remind y'all that the Health Committee is canceled today. We will be meeting on Wednesday, and we will be taking up bills on Wednesday. But today, since it is canceled, I believe there's some meetings after that that are also canceled, and you're welcome to join us. We're going to a fabulous facility out in Newton, Rockdale, in Walton County's Baxalta, and they are the makers of HIV medications and globulin facility that produces all kinds of medications. And as you remember, that was part of our economic development a few years ago to get Baxter, which is the original company. It's morphed into Baxalta. But you're welcome to go. We're going to meet at 3 o'clock this afternoon on the curb out here beside CLOB. And I believe we're guaranteed to be back by 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I would appreciate the Health Committee if you could go on this tour. I think it's very enlightening to see not only what we've accomplished with economic development, but also to see the providers of pharmaceuticals, and we're very proud to have them here in the state of Georgia. With that, I'll close. Thank you, and I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator in the 42nd. 42nd on a point of personal privilege.
Good morning, colleagues. As we embark on a new session, there's one bill in particular that deserves a very careful read. Every member of this body should understand what it would do. It's called the First Amendment Defense Act, but I don't think that's a very good name. Perhaps the Defense Against the First Amendment Act would be better. I'm going to explain why. I believe that everyone in this chamber comes to work down here every day trying to make the lives of Georgians better, trying to improve our outcomes, and trying to bring business to our state. I don't think that the First Amendment Defense Act does any of that, but here's what it would do. It takes one group of people who hold a view that marriage should be only between a man and a woman, and here's the more interesting part, that all sexual activity should take place only within such a relationship, and it makes them a protected class. Except, of course, people doesn't mean people as in flesh and blood. It also means any type of for-profit or nonprofit business that you can think of. And you may think that I and the bill are only talking about views that arise out of a genuinely held religious belief, but that's not what this bill says. This bill starts there, but then quickly goes on to expand protection to anyone who has any sort of conviction against gay people. But wait, not just gay people. Anyone who has had a sexual relationship outside of marriage. So that could be single mothers, that could be anyone who's ever had an affair, anyone who's been cohabitating, and the list goes on, and it protects that viewpoint that those people aren't worthy and aren't deserving of swimming in the same pool with the rest of us. Think of all the Georgians who fit those categories, and many others that I haven't enumerated, and unfortunately this legislation would hang a scarlet letter around their necks. What this bill says is that when you discriminate, no action can be taken against you. That would have many consequences, intended and unintended. Everything from a store clerk that asks the couple he suspects are gay to sink another line, to the government clerk who declines to process a joint tax return for a same-sex couple, to a teacher who refuses to teach certain children because their parents are unwed. At a minimum, this legislation would invite reams of litigation. This bill would protect those viewpoints in the broadest way possible, while at the same time denying protection for those who might speak up in support of same-sex marriage or a sexual relationship outside of marriage. The problem here is this proposed selective government favoritism is doomed to failure in the courts. Even if supporters of traditional marriage are under attack politically and in the court of public opinion, as they claim, they are not entitled to government action that would grant them protection and rights not available to those who support the rights of same-sex couples. As the Cato Institute's Walter Olson wrote in Newsweek, a serious attempt to resolve the culture wars in this area might look for ways to accommodate minority religious viewpoints without harming the operations of government or the beneficiaries of public programs. But the way FATA is written, and I quote, continue quoting Mr. Olson, it isn't an accommodation law. It's an our guys win law, because it would be government choosing to protect one kind of speech above opposing speech on the exact same topic. My colleagues, religious freedom is already enshrined in our First Amendment to our Constitution. It is a cherished American value. Giving one group rights to discriminate against another group, however, is not. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 39th.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, it is apparent that the nomination of Judge Dax Lopez to the federal court has been scuttled by our U.S. Senator, one of our U.S. Senators. It is commendable that his colleague, the senior senator, believed that Judge Lopez at least deserved a hearing, an opportunity to be vetted fully in public so that the citizenry of Georgia could listen to the pros and cons of his nomination. It is unfortunate that that did not happen, but as I was reflecting and reading over the weekend on the nomination of Dax Lopez, you know, I'm a history teacher, so I started thinking, and I thought about another nomination in 1967. This was a nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Another nomination that was slowed down, almost scuttled, and that is a nomination of Thurgood Marshall. And Thurgood Marshall was nominated by President Johnson in 1967, and his nomination was the first opportunity an African American would have had to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. And in those confirmation hearings, Thurgood Marshall was vilified, interrogated for having association with radical organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And there were 20, as a matter of fact, there were 20 U.S. senators that abstained on his nomination. There were 20 U.S. senators that said, he's too liberal, he's too radical. And I would submit to you that Thurgood Marshall was a pretty good U.S. Supreme Court justice. From my point of view, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a classroom teacher. Wouldn't know a legal brief from a BVD brief. But what I do know is what's right and what's wrong, and the way that Dax Lopez was treated was wrong. To say that we ought to scuttle his nomination because he sat on the board of an organization that advocated for undocumented folk, or that he advocated for undocumented folk, that should not. And I think 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, we're going to look back and say, hold it now. We did not allow this jurist, this qualified person, this Georgian to serve on the federal court because he was hanging around with folk who stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Nonpartisan, by the way, nonpartisan organization. Republican and Democrats are part of that organization. So when I thought about what was said and has been said about Judge Lopez, I thought about Thurgood Marshall. And guess what? One of his law clerks was nominated for the U.S. Supreme Court, one of Thurgood Marshall's law clerks, Judge Sotomayor. And guess what? When she became nominated, some people jumped on her for having clerked for this liberal Thurgood Marshall. You know, somewhere it has to stop. This litmus test. And I think, but it probably won't stop. But the Latino community is not the only community. We all should be outraged, not just Latinos, but anybody who believes that nominees ought to get a fair hearing and a fair chance to make their case to the public. So this round, it's not Dax Lopez that lost. It's the people of the state of Georgia that lost. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 18th for a point of personal privilege. You got the well. Scared? Scared? Say you're scared. Chair recognizes Senator from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not intend to come down here today, but when things are said about legislative proposals that are simply demonstrably not true, I think you've got an obligation to clear the record. The fact of the matter is, if you oppose the First Amendment Defense Act, what you are saying is that you believe that a local government that says teaching traditional marriage is discriminatory may assess property taxes on a house of worship. You are saying that you agree with that position, that you think a local government should be able to use the power of taxation to silence those with whom they disagree. If you oppose the First Amendment Defense Act, you are saying you would support a government bureaucrat removing the accreditation from a school that teaches a religious tradition on marriage and the family. For that reason alone, you would pull the accreditation of that school. If you oppose the First Amendment Defense Act, you are saying that a faith-based adoption agency placing at-risk children with loving families must choose between their sincerely held religious belief and continuing to minister to those children and those families. I wish legislation like the First Amendment Defense Act was unnecessary. But we know, because we're seeing it already from legal scholars on the left, that this attack is coming. 6 days following the United States Supreme Court decision redefining marriage this summer, we had a professor at the University of Georgia say that religious schools should have their tax-exempt status taken away from them if they teach traditional marriage. The First Amendment Defense Act isn't about imposing a religious point of view on any person. It is about maintaining what I hear so often from folks on the left, a wall of separation to keep the government from dictating to people of faith what beliefs are allowed by government and what beliefs will result in punitive action, taxation, closure of your business, closure of your school. This country was founded on a notion that people with widely different beliefs, widely differing belief systems, could live side by side. And if you and I don't agree, that's fine. We enjoy these liberties equally. But what we are now seeing is a move to appropriate the machinery of government to silence people of faith with whom certain folks disagree. It is totally contrary to our constitutional founding. It's totally contrary to the values enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. But we know that legal assault is coming. And that's why you've seen this legislation introduced at the federal level. It's why you've seen every Republican congressman from Georgia and both Republican United States senators from Georgia put their name to it and say it's correct, it is the right public policy. And I would submit to you, if it's the right public policy to come out of the Congress of the United States to offer modest protection so that people of faith may merely know that they will be allowed to teach their faith to their children, that we won't have court decisions like we had in Massachusetts last month, where a court interfered with who a Catholic school in Massachusetts may or may not employ, and interfered with the contractual relationship that that school requires to reinforce the teachings of their church. To simply have a legal system where we say, well, does your religious belief fall into column A or column B? If it falls into column A, we'll leave you alone. But if it falls into column B, we will do everything we can to push you out of the public square, to silence you, to close your church, and to close your business. That's wrong. And that's why Senate Bill 284 is moving forward. That's why we are trying to move this forward. Not to lash out or strike out at anybody, but to ask for a modest space where people with different points of view may be able to express those points of view without fear of retribution from their government. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I'm so happy. I think the guys in the chamber will agree with me and my colleague from the 35th. I'm happy a South Side Georgia guy, Cam Newton, is going to the Super Bowl. Yay, South Side. I yield the well.
That will conclude our points of personal privilege. You have a consent calendar of privilege resolutions that are before you. There is one on the consent calendar that is actually there by accident. It is not on the consent calendar. It is printed, but it is not on it. So just so everyone knows, SR 805 has been assigned to the Transportation Committee. That was done earlier this morning, so everyone would know. All right, the consent calendar is before you. Is there objection? Without objection, the consent calendar is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? We have some special guests that will be arriving momentarily, and that will be the business of the day. And it is National Guard Day, so a number of presentations that have been caught up in the House, and as usual, the House is taking a lot longer time to do their business. Now would be a good time for the senators to get your page pictures.
all know he's here, don't you?
Yeah, bring him on back. Let's get it. Let me have the Senate's attention for just a moment. It is always a great honor and a privilege to recognize and receive back to the Senate not only former colleagues, but also our individuals that represent us in the United States Senate. And today, to have United States Senator Johnny Isakson present is a really honor. He is a man that served this body with great distinction and is now in a role that is serving with a phenomenal distinction at the federal level. Please join me in giving a warm Senate welcome to a colleague of ours, Senator Johnny Isakson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor Cagle. It's a pleasure to be back home again. I spent 3 great years in the Senate, 14 great years in the Georgia House. Those 17 years of public service were the most memorable of my career, and it's so good to see so many old friends and so many new friends. I appreciate what you do. You know, the federal role and the state role is supposed to be a partnership. There are those areas where we work together for the betterment of our state. We've got some guardsmen I know up in the gallery. Today's National Guard Day, and I'm glad, as a former guardsman myself, and you're never really a former guardsman, once in, you're always in. I'm proud to be here the day you're honoring the Guard, but I want to tell you a little secret about the National Guard. With the reductions by this administration in our armed forces, our Army is now going down to 450,000 active duty troops. Without the 330 Army Guardsmen around the country, we could not fight any battle to preserve this country. Yeah, you can clap. That's one of my aides. I'm going to have to give him a raise for doing that. But you know, the battles are tough and the battles are intense. Every single Georgia Guardsman in the last 13 years has been deployed at least once to either Afghanistan or Iraq, and many of them many times. They do a fantastic job for our country. We salute you in your service to the country. You're great to represent us, and we're honored to have you here today on National Guard Day. The second biggest place we're partners is our state infrastructure. And there's no bigger investment that we have in Georgia than the Port of Savannah. You, the legislature, and Governor Deal did the right thing to forward fund the $240 million to get the project started, but it's now our turn. President Obama put a placeholder in his recommended budget. I'm meeting next week with the Corps of Engineers. We're going to work to see to it the $80 to $100 million we need for the next 4 years. Every year is in there. So the federal commitment of $400 million is as solid as the state commitment of $200 million. And in 2019, the Panamax ships of the 21st century will sail through the Savannah port at a depth of 47 feet and will tremendously increase the throughput of our port. With what you've done on the inland ports, we have a tremendous capacity to expand Georgia's role even greater in sea travel and in trade. Giving you one example, when I went with Vice President Biden to the Port of Panama, the Panama Canal last year to see their widening, he and I stood on the new canal and we talked about the size of the next ships to come through. Right now, the ships that come through to Savannah have 9,000 tractor-trailer load containers on them. The Panamax ships of the 21st century will have 14,000 per ship. That's an increase of 33% in throughput. And with the new inland port in Cordele, the inland port in Murray County, and the expansion that y'all have done on our infrastructure on the highways, we're going to have the commerce of America comes through the Port of Savannah. You should be very proud, and I commend you on everything that you've done. It is an honor and a privilege for me to represent you in Washington. If I can ever be of help, don't hesitate to call us. I can't promise we'll solve every problem, but I can promise you it'll never be for a lack of effort. May God bless each of you. May God bless the United States of America, and God bless the great state of Georgia. Thank you very much.
Well done, Johnny, as always. And we now have the National Guard that's arrived, and we are very privileged to welcome them to the State Senate. Secretary will read a resolution.
Senate Resolution 688 by Senators Dugan of the 30th, Hill of the 4th, Hill of the 6th, Harbison of the 15th, Schaefer of the 48th, and others, a resolution recognizing January 25th, 2016 as National Guard Day at the Capitol and for other purposes. Whereas the Georgia Department of Defense provides ready and relevant military forces to the combat commanders and, with the consent of the governor, provides command and control capabilities to support homeland defense and defense support to civil authorities. And whereas the Georgia Department of Defense is located at the Clay National Guard Center in in Marietta, Georgia, and includes the Georgia Army National Guard, the Georgia Air Force National Guard, and the Georgia State Defense Force. And whereas the Georgia State Defense Force is a volunteer unit of the Georgia Department of Defense, serving in support of the national and state constitutions under the direction of the Governor and the Adjutant General of Georgia. And whereas the selfless and heroic actions of the Georgia National Guard stand as a shining tribute to the strength of the human spirit, and it is abundantly fitting and proper that the outstanding accomplishments of these remarkable and distinguished Georgians be appropriately recognized. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend the men and women of the Georgia National Guard for their strength, leadership, and courage, and their willingness to find meaning in something greater than themselves, and recognize January 25th, 2016 as National Guard Day at the Capitol.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. We appreciate so much the men and women that serve our country. Our National Guard is providing wonderful resources, and it is led by a wonderful individual, General Gerard, a great family friend, and we appreciate them being here to speak the resolution and honor our very special guest. I call upon the distinguished senator from the 30th.
Thank you, Governor. It's my honor to introduce Brigadier General Joe Gerard. As you know, General Gerard graduated from North Georgia College and State University and was commissioned as second lieutenant in the U.S. Army in 1988. He served on active duty for over 20 years and retired as a lieutenant colonel on April 2009. While on active duty, General Gerard served in numerous duty stations to include Germany, Fort Stewart, Georgia, Fort Riley, Kansas, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In 2003, he deployed as the battalion executive officer of 3rd Battalion, 27th Field Artillery Regiment in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, where his unit supported 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. In 2005, General Gerard deployed to Iraq as the Deputy Brigade Commander of the 18th Field Artillery Brigade, Airborne, where he served as the Deputy Effects Coordinator and the Chief of Assessments for the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. From September 2011 to January 2015, General Gerard served as the Assistant Adjutant General for the Georgia Department of Defense. General Gerard's awards include the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, and Meritorious Service Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. General Gerard worked in Afghanistan from August 2009 to September 2011, most recently with the Counterinsurgency Advisory and Assistance Team. The CAT works directly for the Commander of International Assistance Forces, Afghanistan, advising and assisting commanders at all levels on counterinsurgency operations. His duties included observing and reporting on COIN activities, identifying best practices, and working with commanders at all levels in order to facilitate organizational and cultural change. General Gerard lives in North Georgia with his wife, Susan, and 3 boys, Ben, Will, and Joseph. Please join me in welcoming General Gerard.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Dugan. Mr. President, thank you. First of all, I got to just say thanks to Senator Isaacson. What he said, he's already said it all about the Guard this morning. We very much appreciate his support and all that he does for us. I just want to reiterate that your Georgia Guard is the best in the nation. And it's the best in the nation not because of anything I do, but because of these great leaders behind me and those that are represented in the balcony up here that are representing just a few of the 14,000 that serve you on a daily basis. And so we very much appreciate y'all letting us be a part of your activities today and be in the Capitol with you. Thank you for supporting us and all that we do. And I can promise you that your Guard is ready to help out the state whenever called. With that, I'd like to bring David Lauer up here. If David would come on up. David is a graduate of Woodstock High School in 2014, and this just goes to show you the type of individual that we're enlisting into the Guard these days. I can't even pronounce what he's going to be doing, but he's a cryptologic linguist who's going to, with Mandarin Chinese. So it's going to take the Army 2 years to train him to do the job that we need him to do for us. And so we're looking for great things, but this is just an example of the type soldiers and airmen that are serving you in the great state of Georgia. So without any further ado, I think Senator Dugan's going to enlist him real quick.
Come on up there. Before we do this, Guard members in the balcony, would you stand for just 1 second, please? Thank you for all you do. As a commissioned officer in the Army, one of the things that I enjoyed doing most was the oath of enlistment for the soldiers either coming in or re-enlisted in the military. It's a bond, it's an oath that you share with each other that you get. You understand that those who haven't done it may not appreciate the words that this oath entails as much as those who have to raise their right hand and live by it day to day. So with that being said, David, if you would turn and face me and raise your right hand. I, David G. Lauer,
I, David G. Lauer,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Georgia,
that I solemnly swear that I will
support
support and defend the Constitution of the United States and Georgia
and against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
I will obey the orders of the President of the United States
I will obey the orders of the President of the United States
and the Governor of the state of Georgia,
and the Governor of the State of Georgia,
and that I will obey the orders of the officers appointed over me,
and I will obey the orders of the officers appointed over me,
according to law and regulation.
according to law and regulation.
So help me God.
So help me God.
You're in. Thank you.
And his mother's in the balcony, so I know she's proud today. So. Thank you all very much.
Well done. No, it's all right. I never had to do it in front of a couple hundred of my closest friends like that.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 46th, the Majority Leader.
President, I move the Senate stand adjourned until 10 o'clock a.m. Tuesday, January 26.
10 o'clock a.m. Tuesday, January 26. Read the announcements.
Rules upon adjournment has been canceled. Agriculture and Consumer Affairs has also been canceled. Regulated Industries and Utilities will be held at 1 p.m. in 310 CLOB. Public Safety will be held at 2 p.m. in 125 Capitol. Joint Education and Youth will be held at 2 p.m. in 506 CLOB. Insurance and Labor will be held at 2 p.m. in 450 Capitol. Science and Technology will be held at 3 p.m. in 307 CLOB. Health and Human Services has been canceled. Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security will be held at 3 p.m. in 125 Capitol. Economic Development and Tourism has been canceled, as well as Finance.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 2nd to make an announcement. I'm sorry, the Senator, from the 4th, 3rd, 4th. I had it right the first, yeah, 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, most of you you all should have received a loaf of bread breakdown in Effingham County as our way of inviting you to the reception this afternoon at 5 o'clock down at the depot to recognize some of God's greenest country down in Effingham County. I hope you can make it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Effingham County. We love Effingham County. Appreciate so much the great work they're doing. Senator from the 2nd, his light is on. Senator from the 2nd, somebody may have just touched his light. I don't know. The Majority Leaders move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All of those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. Clearly in the eyes of the chair. The ayes have it. We stand adjourned. Just as a matter of information, veterans, which is on the up above on the projector saying it is having the meeting, it is canceled. Veterans is canceled today.